Grant, you brought something to my attention recently which I find incredibly concerning. The U.S. has a relationship with these compact countries, Micronesia, Marshall Islands, and Palau, govern about 6 million nautical miles of territory that essentially has been under U.S. Military control, as in defense, of course, right, since World War II. And that may be in jeopardy. And I just find that absolutely astonishing. Tell me about this. Yeah.
Sure. Well, it's not just in jeopardy. This is in extremis, which means that we're about to lose. And these three countries that you've mentioned, they're right in the middle of the Central Pacific. And they occupy a huge amount of terrain. It's about as big as the continental United States. So think of a map of the Pacific, and you look at Hawaii, and then you go west. And you will run into the Marshall Islands, and then Federated States of Micronesia, and then Palau. And when you're at Palau, you're almost at the Philippines. So you have this very long corridor, this huge territory, where the Americans have, since World War II, we have had total control, total dominance of this area because these countries have signed treaties with us, the compacts, which say that in exchange for financial aid and some other benefits, these countries will allow the Americans to have sole and exclusive military access to their territory and the right to keep any other foreign military out of the region. And this is a privilege that we've had, that we've seemed to have taken it for granted, and we have thought, well, it'll always be ours because we have a treaty. And we are now in danger of losing this. And to the point that you could have foreign militaries start to come in, or that we would not be welcome there. We would not have the free access. And try conducting military operations in the Pacific all the way to the Asian mainland without having a secure Central Pacific. These countries are a sort of a high-speed corridor, is one way to look at it, that gives the U.S. military access to Asia and back, and also access to move north to Japan, south to Australia. If you don't have control of that, then you're going to have a very hard time defending anything in the Pacific, and you will eventually find yourself really defending the United States from, at best, Hawaii, and quite possibly the American West Coast.
That's astonishing. These people actually are, they serve in the U.S. military. That's actually part of the deal, as I understand, at significantly higher rates than most states. Actually, these are very pro-American people, traditionally at least, right?
Oh, very much.
And the thing that always comes up today, right? We're spending incredible amounts overseas, right? There's just, kind of a new bill. You're sending, I don't know, I forget how many tens of billions to support Ukraine. There's a lot of spending, and people are asking. There's a lot of questions being asked, right? So what is in jeopardy, and what is the price tag for what you're talking about?
Well, I should explain that the reason why this is in danger is because parts of the treaties that deal with the financial aid America gives these three countries, and so the other sort of support services, these have been up for renewal. The treaties have been signed, but Congress hasn't passed them. So they're not going anywhere. And the amounts of money we are talking about in terms of finance, it's about $120 million a year for the next 20 years.
I just want to remember that, like $1 million, right? Because generally when we talk about these sorts of aid scenarios, we're always talking billion.
Mm-hmm. Right? Oh, yeah. You're right. We think that, unless it's $1 billion, it isn't really much money. We're talking millions here, 120 million. And the legislation, which is currently in Congress, or the Senate has passed it, and now Congress will decide on it. This is a $95 billion sort of security assistance bill, and about $60 billion goes to Ukraine. And the legislation actually had provision to pay the $120 million a year for the three compact states, which is what they call them. And it was mysteriously removed under obscure circumstances at a meeting, I'm told, between Chuck Schumer, Mitch McConnell, and Susan Collins of Maine and Patty Murray of Washington. It was before this meeting, the provisions to pay for the compact states was in there, and after the meeting, it was gone. And $120 million, you just can hardly believe how little money that is in the context of the U.S. budget. For example, in Afghanistan, we were paying about $48 billion a year for operations, $48 billion. And this was every year for a good long while. So we ended up spending about $1 trillion. Once we have, if you've paid $120 million a year for 20 years to the compact states, you will have spent something like $2.3 billion versus the $48 billion we were spending a year in Afghanistan.
Which is just, again, we get lost in these numbers, but that's 48,000 million versus 120 million.
That's how it is. And keep in mind that Afghanistan was a country of no strategic significance to the United States. None. And now we're talking about three countries that occupy really the center of the Pacific Ocean and are indispensable to America's defense position. So we talk about how we defend against the People's Liberation Army. We keep China sort of in check by defending along a line from Japan to Taiwan to the Philippines and down to Malaysia. And that's our so-called first island chain. And we always talk about how we have this great relationship with Japan. Japan is building up its military. The Philippines, we're doing more with them. They're taking their military seriously. We're helping the Taiwanese out more than we ever have. Well, you can do all this all you want. You can do it as well as you want. But if you don't look at what's happening in your rear area, you're going to lose. But the amounts of money we're talking about is just embarrassing that, and we're actually arguing about it. And it strikes me that when this provision was removed from the legislation, and that it presumably it was done to save money. And this is a bit like in a hospital. If they want to save some money, so they want to reduce their electricity costs, so they start pulling plugs out of the wall. And yeah, you'll save some electricity, but what if one of the plugs is the one that keeps the life support systems, the life support machines going? And this is where the leadership of, I'd say, the Congress and the Senate needs to realize that they are in the position where if they don't get this right, they will be considered the people who gave the Pacific to China.